Submit to God and be at peace with him. In this way, prosperity will come to you. Accept instruction from his mouth and lay up his words in your heart. If you return to the Almighty, you will be restored if you remove wickedness far from your tent. Most of the book of Job is a dialogue between Job and three friends of his that come to him in his sorrow. Typically, we welcome the presence of friends when we need comfort. However, these three friends are the kinds of friends I wouldn't welcome. The words I just spoke are from his friend Eliphaz from chapter 22 of the book of Job. A lot of terrible things have happened to Job, and his friend comes to him in his distress and tells him it's his fault. And if he just got right with God, things would be fine. And Job's response to his friend is this searing speech of frustration about injustice. And why? Because God knows that he has dealt with his sin in the way that God requires. He and God are good. So when these terrible things happen to him, it's natural for Job to look around and play the comparison game. He sees the wrongdoing that's causing people to suffer. He sees how the rich are exploiting the poor, how these people are working for next to nothing and laboring, and landowners having unfair labor practices, and they're doing evil and nothing's happening to them. He looks at those people who are actually causing pain to others in the world and he says, why am I suffering when I know I'm right with God, but God isn't making them suffer for their evil? We don't have to look very far in our own life or in the world to see where this is happening. Evil people get away with evil things all the time, and that's not okay. So we ask, why is God silent? Why doesn't he judge evil? Thieves and scoundrels flourish, while the poor and the defenseless suffer. Job speaks to this a little bit in chapter 24, verses 6 through 8, where he says, they gather fodder in the fields and glean in the vineyards of the wicked. Lacking clothes, they spend the night naked, and they have nothing to cover themselves in the cold. They are drenched by the mountain rains and hug the rocks for lack of shelter. And then a little bit later in verse 12 of that same chapter, he says, the groans of the dying rise up from the city, and the souls of the wounded cry out for help, but God charges no one with wrongdoing. When we suffer, we usually have one of two responses as Christians. We say, well, we can't understand it. God's ways are not our ways. Or we might say, there's a purpose for all of it. We might quote the verse, all things work together for our good. Most non-believers and those who don't trust and have faith in God yet would say those are not good enough explanations. And I'm not sure that they're the best response either. So what is a better way to respond? How can we comfort our friends when they experience pain and struggle? And what truth do we need to speak to ourselves when we're having Job's kind of but God moment? Because the question, if God is good, then why, is not a question that's born of unbelief. It's a question that only belief can produce. Because there's a knowing that only pain can open. The soul that's struggling and is in pain honestly doesn't need a theological lesson. They need the presence and the comfort of someone who is willing to sit in the mess and the brokenness that's around them and doesn't speak words of platitude or consolation that can feel empty. So if God is good, then why is a question that only belief can produce. Then it's logical to conclude that only those who have tasted goodness can be undone by its absence. Job is not expressing disbelief in God here. You don't cry out to God when you don't believe in him. And you don't cry out to God if you don't think that he can fix what is broken. We're going to dive a little bit more into chapter 24 next week. And I encourage you to go listen to my whole sermon from last week, where we really examine what is our response to suffering? What is God's response to suffering?